When Margaret locked my 7-year-old daughter in a dark bathroom for picking a flower, she thought she was teaching us a lesson about HOA rules. She had no idea her cruel punishment would backfire in ways she never imagined, destroying her life while making our family stronger than ever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning started like any other Tuesday. I was making breakfast for my 7-year-old daughter Emma when she came running into the kitchen. Her pigtails were bouncing with excitement. "Daddy, can I play in the community garden today?" Mrs. Peterson said the butterflies are everywhere now. I smiled at her happiness. We had moved to Willowbrook Heights 6 months ago. We wanted a safe, family-friendly community. The HOA papers promised children playing freely and neighbors helping neighbors. It looked like a perfect suburban paradise. What they did not mention was Margaret Thornfield. Margaret was the HOA president. She was a woman in her late 50s who treated the neighborhood rules like sacred laws. She had perfectly styled gray hair and always wore pressed blazers. She carried a clipboard everywhere she went. The neighbors called her Margaret the Enforcer, but never to her face. "Of course, sweetheart," I told Emma, touching her hair. "Just remember to stay in the play areas." Emma nodded eagerly and ran outside. Through the window, I watched her skip toward the small community garden at the end of our street. The sight made my heart warm. After the divorce, seeing Emma happy again was all that mattered to me. I was washing dishes when I heard the shouting. My blood turned cold when I heard Emma's voice crying out. I dropped the plate I was holding and rushed outside. My heart was pounding against my chest. The scene I saw made my stomach drop. Emma was standing near the community center building. Tears were streaming down her face. Margaret was standing over her, pointing an angry finger. "This is completely wrong," Margaret was saying. Her voice was sharp and mean. "Children cannot just run wild in this community. What is going on here?" I demanded. I rushed to Emma's side and pulled her close. Margaret turned her cold eyes to me. "Your daughter was picking flowers from the garden beds. That is destruction of community property." I looked at Emma's small hands. She was holding a tiny daisy. It was wilted from her tears. "She picked one flower," I said. I tried to keep my voice calm. "She is 7 years old. The rules are the rules, Mr. Davidson. No exceptions." Margaret's lips were pressed into a thin line. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that hurts property values." Emma pulled on my shirt. "Daddy, I just wanted to give it to you. Like Mommy used to do." My heart broke a little more. Emma's mother had died in a car accident 2 years ago. She used to pick flowers from our old garden and leave them on my bedside table. "I understand," I said softly to Emma. Then I looked up at Margaret. She did not know. "I will make sure she understands the rules." But Margaret was not finished. "There will be a formal citation. $50 fine for property damage." $50? For a daisy? Rules are rules. Margaret pulled out her phone and began typing. "I am also recommending a formal review of your family's compliance with community standards." The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. I knew what that meant. The HOA had the power to make our lives terrible. Margaret seemed determined to do exactly that. Over the next few weeks, the harassment began. We received citations for everything possible. Emma's bicycle was improperly stored when she left it on our front lawn for 10 minutes. Our trash can was positioned incorrectly when I put it out 12 hours before pickup instead of 6 hours. Even Emma's chalk drawings on our own driveway were called unsightly modifications. Each citation came with a fine. Each fine came with Margaret's cold smile when she delivered the notices by hand. Emma began to change. The happy, carefree child who had been so excited about our new home became quiet and sad. She stopped playing outside. She was afraid of breaking another rule she did not understand. "Daddy, why does the mean lady hate us?" she asked one evening as I tucked her into bed. I did not have an answer that would make sense to a 7-year-old. How could I explain that some people find power in making others miserable? The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon in July. The community was having its summer barbecue in the clubhouse. Despite everything, I thought it might be good for Emma to play with other children in the neighborhood. Maybe if people saw her as just a kid trying to fit in, they would talk some sense into Margaret. Emma was excited. She wore her favorite yellow sundress and brought Mr. Buttons, her stuffed elephant. She had carried him everywhere since her mother died. The barbecue was held in the community center. This building had the clubhouse, a small gym, and public restrooms. Emma played with a few other children while I made awkward small talk with neighbors. They seemed sympathetic but too afraid of Margaret to speak up. Everything was going well until Emma needed to use the bathroom. "I will be right back, Daddy," she said, holding Mr. Buttons. I watched her walk toward the restrooms at the back of the building. Her little yellow dress was bright against the neutral walls. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. A cold fear began to creep up my spine. I walked toward the bathrooms and knocked on the door. "Emma? Sweetheart, are you okay?" "Daddy?" Her voice was muffled and panicked. "I cannot get out. The door will not open." I tried the handle. It was locked from the outside. My hands began to shake as I realized what had happened. Someone had locked my 7-year-old daughter in the bathroom during a community event. "Hold on, baby. Daddy is going to get you out." I ran back to the main room. I looked through the crowd until I found the building manager. "Someone locked my daughter in the bathroom," I said. I was fighting to keep the panic out of my voice. The manager was a kind man named Robert. He immediately grabbed his keys. "That is impossible. Those doors do not lock from the outside unless—" He stopped talking. His face went pale. "Unless what?" I demanded. "Unless someone used the emergency lock. It is only supposed to be used for maintenance or emergencies." We rushed back to the bathroom. Robert fumbled with his keys. I could hear Emma crying on the other side of the door. "I am scared, Daddy. It is dark and I cannot get out." "I am here, sweetheart. We are getting you out right now." The lock clicked open. I pushed the door wide. Emma flew into my arms, sobbing and shaking. Mr. Buttons fell to the floor, forgotten in her terror. "Who did this?" I asked Robert. My voice was deadly quiet. Robert's eyes looked around nervously. "I do not know. The emergency lock can only be used with a special key." "Who has access to that key?" "Board members," he whispered. "HOA board members." The crowd had gathered around us now. They were talking in shock and concern. Emma held onto me tightly. Her small body was trembling. That is when I saw her. Margaret stood at the edge of the crowd. Her face showed no emotion. But in her hand, barely visible, was a small silver key attached to an HOA keychain. Our eyes met across the room. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in her expression. It was not remorse. It was satisfaction. She had locked my traumatized 7-year-old daughter in a dark bathroom to teach me a lesson about following rules. The room fell silent as people began to understand what had happened. Even Margaret's most loyal supporters looked shocked. "You," I said. My voice carried across the room. "You did this." Margaret straightened her shoulders. "I do not know what you are saying, Mr. Davidson. I am not hinting at anything. I am stating a fact." I stood up, still holding Emma. "You locked my child in that bathroom." "That is a serious accusation," Margaret said, but her voice shook slightly. Robert stepped forward. His face was red with anger. "Margaret, do you have your emergency key?" Margaret's hand moved to her pocket without thinking. "Of course I do. Board members are required to carry them." "Show it to me." The crowd held its breath. Margaret's face went pale as she realized the trap she had walked into. Slowly she pulled out the keychain. The key was there, but it was warm and slightly wet with sweat from her hand. "This key was just used," Robert said, looking at it carefully. "The metal is warm and there is moisture on it. You locked that child in the bathroom." The crowd started talking in shocked voices. Several people pulled out their phones and started recording everything. Margaret's carefully built mask finally broke. She needed to learn. They both needed to learn that rules matter in this community. The admission sent a chill through the room. This woman had deliberately scared a 7-year-old child as punishment for her father's disobedience. "You locked a child in a dark room," said Mrs. Chin, one of the other board members. "A child who lost her mother. What is wrong with you?" Margaret looked around the room. She was perhaps finally realizing that she had gone too far. The community standards, she was disrupting. But no one was listening to her excuses anymore. I looked down at Emma. She had stopped crying but was still holding on to me tightly. Her eyes were wide with fear and confusion. "It is okay, sweetheart," I whispered. "The mean lady cannot hurt you anymore." But I knew it was not okay. It might never be okay again. That night, Emma finally fell asleep in my bed because she was too afraid to sleep alone. I sat in my kitchen and made phone calls. First I called the police. What Margaret had done was false imprisonment, a crime. Whether they chose to prosecute or not, there would be an official record. Then I called a lawyer. I was not usually someone who sued people, but this crossed every line possible. Finally, I called my brother, who worked in local journalism. "She did what?" he said when I finished explaining. "She locked Emma in a bathroom." My 7-year-old daughter who is already hurt from losing her mother. Jesus, Mike. That is not just cruel, it is crazy. Within 24 hours, the story had spread beyond our small community. Local news picked it up first, then bigger outlets. The headline, HOA President Locks Grieving Child in Bathroom Over Flower Picking, went viral on social media. The community exploded in anger. Neighbors who had been too scared to speak up before were now calling for Margaret's immediate removal. The other board members wanted to distance themselves from the scandal. They called an emergency meeting. Margaret was removed from her position within 48 hours. But the damage to Emma was already done. She stopped sleeping through the night. She would wake up crying about being locked in dark places. She became afraid of closed doors. She insisted they stay open even when she was using the bathroom at home. The happy, trusting child I had been trying so hard to help heal was broken all over again. I took her to a child psychologist, Dr. Martinez. She explained that Emma was showing signs of fear of small spaces and anxiety disorder caused by the incident. The good news, Dr. Martinez said, is that children can bounce back. With proper therapy and support, she can recover from this. But it will take time. The one thing Margaret had stolen from us. Meanwhile, the legal cases moved forward. The district attorney decided to press charges for false imprisonment and child endangerment. Margaret hired an expensive lawyer. He tried to argue that it was a misunderstanding, and that she had planned to unlock the door right after making her point. But the evidence was clear. She had deliberately locked a child in a small space and left her there for nearly 20 minutes. In some states, that was considered torture when done to a child. The civil lawsuit was even more clear-cut. Intentional causing of emotional distress, negligence, violation of civil rights. The lawyer I hired was confident we would win significant money. But none of that would give Emma her sense of safety back. As the months passed, I watched my daughter slowly begin to heal. Dr. Martinez worked with her on breathing techniques and coping strategies. Emma started sleeping in her own room again. She insisted on a night light and the door staying open a little. The community supported us in ways I had not expected. Neighbors brought meals and offered to babysit. Mrs. Peterson, the elderly woman who had first encouraged Emma to look for butterflies in the garden, created a special flower bed just for Emma. She could pick flowers there anytime she wanted. The new HOA board implemented changes too. They created a child-friendly community policy. They removed many of the petty rules that had made life miserable for families. They also implemented mandatory training for board members about appropriate conflict resolution. But the most important change was in Emma herself. One day about 6 months after the incident, I found her in our backyard. She was picking dandelions and putting them in a small vase. "What are you making, sweetheart?" She looked up at me with a smile. It was the first genuine smile I had seen from her in months. "I am making a bouquet for Mommy's picture," she said. "And one for you too, Daddy, because flowers make everything more beautiful." In that moment, I realized that Margaret had not won. She had tried to break our spirits, to teach us that we did not belong in her perfect community. But instead, she had shown us the strength we had inside ourselves. The criminal trial began 8 months after the incident. Margaret's lawyer tried every trick in the book. He argued that she was under stress. He claimed she had forgotten about Emma being in the bathroom. He even suggested that Emma had locked herself in somehow. But the evidence was overwhelming. Security cameras showed Margaret using her key to lock the bathroom door. They showed her walking away and returning to the party. They showed her standing calmly in the crowd for 20 minutes while a child screamed for help just yards away. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman so obsessed with power and control that she was willing to terrorize a grieving child to prove a point. Emma had to testify. I was worried about how it would affect her, but Dr. Martinez had prepared her well. She spoke clearly and honestly about what had happened. She described the fear, the darkness, the feeling of being trapped. "I kept calling for my daddy," she said in her small voice. "But the mean lady would not let me out." There was not a dry eye in the courtroom. Margaret was found guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced her to 6 months in jail, followed by 2 years of probation and mandatory anger management classes. "Miss Thornfield," the judge said during sentencing, "you held a position of trust in your community. You were supposed to make the neighborhood a better place for everyone, including children. Instead, you used your power to terrorize an innocent child who had already suffered more loss than most adults. Your actions were not just criminal, they were cruel and cowardly." The civil trial was quicker. The jury awarded us $2.3 million in damages. It was money we never wanted to have, earned through Emma's trauma. But it would ensure that she could get the best therapy available and that her college education would be secured. More importantly, it sent a message to HOAs everywhere. You cannot abuse your power without consequences. Margaret's lawyer filed appeals, but they were all denied. She served her full sentence and was ordered to pay the judgment. She lost her house, her savings, and her reputation. But the real victory was not in the courtroom. 2 years after the incident, Emma had her 8th birthday party. We held it in our backyard, which was now full of flowers that she had planted herself. Children from the neighborhood came to celebrate. Even some of the adults who had been too scared to speak up before were there, bringing gifts and apologies. Emma ran around the yard, laughing and playing, no longer afraid of closed doors or dark spaces. She had worked hard with Dr. Martinez to overcome her fears. She still had moments of anxiety, but she had learned tools to cope with them. During the party, Mrs. Peterson pulled me aside. "You know," she said, "what Margaret did was terrible. But in a way it brought this community together. We all realized that we had been letting fear control us. Fear of confrontation, fear of standing up to bullies, fear of doing what was right." She was right. The neighborhood had changed. The new HOA board was made up of parents and community members who actually cared about making the area a good place to live. They focused on real issues like street maintenance and community events, not petty rule enforcement. Children played freely in the common areas now. Neighbors helped each other without fear of citations. The community garden had been expanded, and families were encouraged to plant and tend it together. Margaret's reign of terror had ended, but the healing it brought about was just beginning. 3 years later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Margaret, writing from a halfway house where she was completing her probation. The letter was short. "Mr. Davidson, I know that no apology can undo what I did to your daughter. I was wrong. I let my need for control blind me to basic human decency. I hope that Emma is doing well and that she can forgive me someday, even though I do not deserve it. I am getting help for my issues and trying to become a better person. Margaret Thornfield." I showed the letter to Emma, who was now 10 years old and thriving in school. "What do you think, sweetheart? Do you want to forgive her?" Emma thought for a long moment. "I think she was very sick in her heart, Daddy. Sick people need to get better. I hope she gets better so she does not hurt any more kids." The wisdom of a child who had been through trauma and come out stronger amazed me. "Does that mean you forgive her?" "I forgive her for me," Emma said carefully, "because holding on to being mad makes my heart hurt. But I do not forget what she did. And I hope other kids never have to go through what I did." That evening, I wrote a response to Margaret's letter. I told her that Emma was doing well. I told her that forgiveness was possible, but that it would take time and continued good behavior on her part. I also told her that we would be watching to make sure she never had the opportunity to hurt another child. Some people might say I was too generous. But I had learned something important through this whole ordeal. Hate and revenge only create more pain. The best revenge against someone who tries to break you is to heal, to grow stronger, and to build something better than what they tried to destroy. Today, Emma is 11 years old. She is confident, kind, and unafraid. She still picks flowers, but now she knows the difference between flowers in a community garden that everyone can enjoy and flowers in decorative beds that should be left alone. She volunteers at the local animal shelter and wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. She has friends throughout the neighborhood, and the community that once felt hostile now feels like home. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had just paid the fines and kept quiet. If I had taught Emma to keep her head down and follow every petty rule, no matter how unreasonable. We would have been smaller people living smaller lives. Instead, we fought back. We stood up to a bully who thought she could terrorize a child without consequences. We showed that communities are stronger when they protect their most vulnerable members, not when they empower those who abuse authority. Margaret Thornfield thought she was teaching us a lesson about following rules. Instead, she taught us a much more important lesson about standing up for what is right, no matter how powerful the person trying to hurt you might seem. The bathroom door that once trapped my daughter became a symbol of breaking free from those who would keep us small and afraid. Every time Emma walks confidently through any doorway now, I am reminded that the strongest people are often those who have been tested by cruelty and chose to respond with courage. Margaret learned too late that actions have consequences. But Emma learned something much more valuable, that she has the power to overcome any challenge and that there are people who will always fight to protect her. In the end, the real winner was not determined in any courtroom. It was determined by who we chose to become after the worst was over. And we chose to become better, stronger, and more compassionate than we were before. Margaret Thornfield locked my daughter in a bathroom, thinking it would teach us our place in her perfect community. She had no idea that it would instead teach us our own strength and show the whole community what they were capable of when they stood together against injustice. That is a lesson worth more than any fine, any citation, or any perfectly maintained property value. It is a lesson that will serve Emma for the rest of her life, long after the memory of that dark bathroom has faded. And sometimes, late at night when I check on Emma sleeping peacefully in her room with the door open just a crack and her nightlight glowing softly, I think that maybe that is the most important victory of all.